You're listening to a Euclid and Oaks production.
Down. Get down. Down. The bass and sound. Get down. The bass and sound. Get down. The bass and sound. Get down. The bass and sound.
It's Tuesday, September 17th, 2019. 6:45 p.m. Eastern Time here in the studios in beautiful downtown Knoxville, Tennessee. Well, we're not actually downtown. We're kind of on the outskirts, right, hon? Mm-hmm. According to CoinMarketCap, the price of Bitcoin is around $10,250. BTC dominance is currently sitting at around 68.1%. Today's random fact: it rains diamonds on Saturn and Jupiter. I'm your host, Crypto Euclid.
I'm Mystical Oaks.
And this is That Bitcoin Show. Before we get into the interview with Mr. Charles Hoskinson, Tamara and I wanted to go over some of the things we discussed. It was such a long, lengthy conversation that I think I'm still processing everything we talked about.
Yeah, we just listened to it again, and I noticed that you took pages of notes, which I've never seen you do before ever. I'm kind of confused what in the world those notes are going to be for, but you took pages of notes.
I took 2 pages
and I wanted to
notepad.
Disagree with you. It's
what?
It's not an interview.
Okay.
It didn't feel like an interview to me. It was really more of a flowing conversation, which I really enjoyed.
Yeah, it was a great conversation. We touched on so many different topics, from the Rolling Stones to happiness as a journey, coming back from being down. I have probably
Is this
50,
where you took all these notes?
Yeah, 50 different bullet points where I took notes. And yeah, I'm proud of myself because I don't usually do this kind of thing. We talked about Faketoshi.
Well,
one of the things that we wanted to I can't speak, discuss was the fact that I had no clue that Charles Hoskinson was the co-founder of Ethereum. And I don't think a lot of people are aware of this as either.
I told you that months and months ago.
You told me that. I wasn't at the time. Who knows, honey? I mean,
even after this conversation, which I guess I wanted to ask him about, but we were talking about life and more just stories and not getting into just like really the negative shit. We kind of touched on some of the things like trolls and stuff like that. And,
yes.
But I like how did that all happen? You know,
right.
So next time, you know, we did leave off in there that, you know.
How did what happen? The splitting of Charles Hoskinson
because when I think of Ethereum, I
think of Vitalik
and aliens. Yeah.
Vitalik.
Right. Yeah. You call him like he's a vitamin drink.
Yeah. We
something.
talked a little bit about Vitalik doing the Reddit AMA, and he was going after Ouroboros. We talked about a million things, and I don't think we need to touch on all of them here. I think we should just let everyone listen. What do you think?
I reached out and let them know. I really think that this was good for us right now. I really enjoyed it. It was more just like I was listening to his stories and taking things from them, and it kind of helped give me a little bit of clarity on like what our goal or purpose is. Because he mentioned, you know, that it's important to maybe create channels for like deep philosophical conversations,
right?
And I kind of enjoy that kind of thing, which I think this is exactly what that is. So
I guess that's what we're trying to do here, is to have deep philosophical conversations
about life
and
stuff.
Bitcoin.
All right, well.
Okay, guys, I hope you like this conversation we had with Charles Hoskinson.
Oh, and I have a special message for Chuck. Can I call you Chuck if he's listening? For Charles. While you're searching for your cherry blossom, enjoy your moments.
Oh, that's deep. Okay, guys, enjoy this. Okay, guys, today on the show, I'm not gonna lie, I'm extremely nervous. We have Charles Hoskinson on the show, and like I said, I'm nervous. I always get nervous when I do these, especially when we have a great guest like this. Mr. Hoskinson was the CEO and co-founder of Ethereum, as everyone knows, founder of IOHK, and the founder and creator of Cardano. And he is here with us today. How are you, sir?
Well, I'm doing great here in warm, sunny Colorado. It's perfect weather. It's a perfect time. It's a beautiful Saturday afternoon. And thank you so much for having me on. I think I keep running into you guys. The last time was New York for Consensus. And I don't think anybody could tell us apart.
Yeah. So I guess it started a while back on Twitter. I would get added on your threads and vice versa. And people would say, oh, that's not Crypto Euclid. That's Charlie Hodgkins, or vice versa. And so my first experience was actually at World CryptoCon, I want to say. About 3 guys came up to me and said, "Are you Charles Hoskinson?" And I said, of course I was like, no, but then I was thinking, why didn't I say yes?
You should have said, "Do you know who I am?"
Yeah.
Yes. Like, it is him.
Yeah.
I told him he should just start signing, things this year.
Right.
Yeah. What do you want, an autograph? Yeah.
Right.
But so I was going to ask you, what are the chances that we are related? And if so, should we start exchanging Christmas gifts?
Well, it depends on where my dad traveled. I was always wondering about that. But,
Yeah.
No, but levity aside, it's always great to talk to you too. And I heard that you had a new show, and whenever anybody has a new show, I always try to come on to give them a little bit of a boost if I can.
Well,
I do have a lot of Twitter followers, and it does tend to help from time to time. So I've always been a fan of your work, and it's great to see that you guys are broadening it a bit.
Awesome.
Well, thank you. That means a lot.
It does. That's great. Yeah, I really enjoyed meeting you at the Polymath event, actually. I had a great time.
Yeah.
It was a little cold. That was the only sad part about that. They got this beautiful outdoor venue that they probably spent way too much money on, and then everybody had to wear jackets.
Mm-hmm.
It's true. But you got to wear your signature jacket, and then Yuki got the privilege of getting to wear it.
Yeah, so we went to
out.
the Polymath event in New York. Tamara and I did, and we showed up there, and you were walking out as we were walking in, and your face lit up when you saw me, and which kind of like shook me a little bit, because I was like, oh wait, he recognizes me. And
it was like Spider-Man.
It was that gif, where the 2 Spider-Men are like pointing at each other. You know what I'm talking about? And then, so you said, oh, hey, I know who you are on Twitter. And then later, we were there, and my wife and Crypto Breakfast, a friend of ours, goaded me to go up to you. You were on stage getting ready to speak, and you were sitting there, and so I went up to you, and you gave me your jacket, and I got up on stage and did a little thing. But I just wanted to say, you're very down-to-earth kind of guy, very friendly, and I appreciate, that was fun.
Yeah. You just can't take yourself too seriously in this space.
Right.
I started, and everybody was at the same level. We were all kind of nobodies, from Andreas to Roger to Eric. And little by little, we got rich and famous, and some people decided that somehow made them better, or it made them like a celebrity or something.
Right.
And the reality is that we're just all people, which is ironic, because I if you polled anybody in the Ethereum community because of the MetaMask tweet, they just all believe I'm just some sort of egotistical asshole running around saying, expecting special service or something. And it's just very uncomfortable when that occurs. In fact, I was in Berlin, completely unrelated to crypto. I was taking a personal trip, and I was there to see Beethoven's Ninth Symphony at the Brandenburg Gate for the anniversary of the fall of the Berlin Wall. And I walked past some people wearing Ethereum T-shirts, and they recognized me, and they said, "Hey, are you here for ETH Berlin?" And I said, "I didn't even know this was going on. That's pretty cool. Let's see if we can go crash it."
Right.
So I go up to the front of the conference. Of course, I didn't have a ticket or anything, and I said to the gal at the front, "Hey, can you get the conference organizer to come out? I'd love to talk to her." And they said, "Okay." And so she comes out, and she says, "Well, I know who you are, and I'll let you in because I don't want to make a meme about it." It's very rude.
Right.
Like, where?
Like, thank you for letting me in. I appreciate it, but please come on. This is pretty crazy. If you guys think this, But this is just how politics work.
Yeah.
People make a gaffe or they say something, and that becomes the person. We like to collapse people down to one statement or one action, and then we just tend to remember that and forget everything else about somebody.
That's
I
true.
try to be nice to everyone wherever possible, and I try to help people along. And I've had some amazing people in this space, from Crypto Lark to you guys to others. And it's really just cool to see how far and fast this movement's grown.
That's the thing about this community that has kept me here, I think, is just the amount of really great people that are involved, and
Right.
And the support you get from the community. And I'm very open about my sobriety and my issues with mental illness and things like that, and the amount of just overwhelming support you get from people, and everyone's going through their own stuff, in life.
Right.
And a lot of people like to just sort of sweep it under the rug and don't talk about it. And I find that being open, and the fact that this community has been so overwhelmingly supportive and welcoming. And if you look at my account, it's not crypto stuff. It's mostly, I'm a shit poster. I just tweet out just funny stuff, but I love the community. And
there are, like he was saying, the people that will hit you like out of the blue. You're like, am I in the Twilight Zone with that comment? Like, what are you talking about?
Well, like, I'll give you another example. So I saw on Cointelegraph that they listed the top 50 people in crypto or something like that, and I noticed on the list that Tiffany Hayden was on the list, and I said, "Oh, that's pretty cool." And so I tweeted her, "Hey, congratulations for being on the Cointelegraph list," and then she just blocked me on Twitter and apparently said something negative. And I was like, I just congratulated you for being on the list. I mean, I know you like the list. You talk about them all the time.
Oh my goodness.
It's just, people have this amazing talent to be selectively serious. So sometimes people, when they like somebody, or they give them the benefit of the doubt, or they take things in good humor and it's a joke. But when they don't like somebody, or they just are having a bad day, then everything is like completely serious, and everybody's attacking you, and everything has to be taken that way. And I think maybe social media tends to exacerbate this. You do one thing, and then it gets accelerated to a level that is just dialed up to 11. Another good example would be that gal who said a racist thing when she was flying to South Africa. And by the time she landed, I think it was Cape Town, she had already lost her job and became a celebrity in 14 hours. There's a whole article written about that. And she, of course, shouldn't have said that. But if you actually look at her background, she's not really a racist person or anything like that. She just said something stupid.
Right.
But we just don't like to live in a forgiving culture. And, one thing defines you, and it collapses you down.
It's true.
And it's a shame, because to be successful and actually do great things in life, you have to take risks.
Right.
You have to be offensive. You have to reinvent yourself all the time. I remember David Bowie, I think it was in the 80s, had this great interview where he said, "Don't play to the gallery and be uncomfortable." And what he's really saying is, you're going to screw up. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to make music that people don't like, and that's okay, because for every time you do that, you get an iPhone, or you get something magical, or you get a hit. You just have to find that healthy balance. And if we have a society that everybody's just waiting for you to screw up, and as soon as you do, then 5,000 people show up out of nowhere and destroy your entire reputation and career and turn you into a permanent meme, and that's all you are, then what you're effectively doing is saying, we're done as a society. We're never going to get any better. We're never going to evolve and grow. We're never going to get good creative things, because we've now brutally punished creativity.
Yeah.
And
how do you find that balance of putting yourself out there, but still, because we all have the ego thing, and we try to protect ourselves, and that's what I think ego is just a means to protect our fragile inner child. And I wonder, how do we find that balance of, like you said, putting it all out there and not being afraid, but still, not overexposing, I guess, yourself in that way.
Well, I think, like he's saying, like you need like a forgiving kind of culture,
Right.
because you have to know the line and kind of walk it. So in order to do that, you go
Right.
over it sometimes,
Right.
and hopefully learn from it.
You know what? You guys keep saying stuff that gives me chills. You said "walk the line." I think of Johnny Cash.
Yeah, absolutely. Johnny Cash was another great example of that.
Right.
That guy had some hard times, man. And actually, there's a great story about Johnny Cash too. Just to go off on a tangent there, he decided that he was going to do a cover of a Nine Inch Nails song, and so he told Trent Reznor in passing, "Hey, I'm going to do this." And Trent's like, "Well, which song are you thinking?" And he says, "Well, let me listen to a lot of your work and see what I can work with." And he said he called him up and said, "Hey, I'm going to do Hurt." And Trent's like, "Well, okay, good luck with that. That's a hard one. And just send me the recording when you're done." Johnny said, "Sure." So Johnny does Hurt. He sends it to Trent Reznor, and Reznor was actually with some people when he got the recording. He said, "Hang on a second, I got to go listen to this real quick." And so he puts on these earmuffs and sits in the corner and listens, and he just gets really angry and knocks over his table. And the guys are like, "Trent, what happened?" And he said, "I just lost my fucking song. Everybody's gonna think Johnny wrote this song, and I covered him. Just lost it. It's my favorite song. I just lost it. These sons of bitches."
Oh my God.
He did a great cover for that. Of course, Willie Nelson heard that. He said, "I'll do the Scientist," and it didn't quite work out as well as Johnny Cash.
Well,
But you gotta, you're absolutely right. You gotta walk that line, and you have to go do it. Now, you asked a specific question of, well, how do you know too far? I guess that's your tolerance for risk and pain. But it's less a question of can you go too far, and it's more of a question of what is the capacity to bounce back, and that's in many different categories. You kind of have an emotional bank account with your family and friends and significant other. You have a financial threshold. How much money can you risk before you bankrupt yourself? But the problem is that despite the emotional stuff and the financial stuff and the age stuff, there's this societal pressure that's starting to come where it again is just saying that failures, basically you can't recover from that. You become defined by it, and that's who you are, and then you get just totally wiped out. So that's really challenging, and it's uniquely Western. They don't really have that in Africa or Asia or other places I've been. They kind of love the underdog story of people coming back. We used to love the underdog story. Like every one of the movies and songs is always about that guy or gal that was down and out. No one thought they'd come back, and they'd find a way to claw and scratch their way back.
Right.
And this new generation seems to think that that's a bad deal, and they just love destroying people. So I don't understand it. I don't know it, but I've been to 52 countries, and I at least have the opportunity to be able to, if one culture is not so productive, to work in another one, and that's why I would chase 20 countries.
You made a
And
good.
by and large, we had a great time.
You made a good point that we are it's like the troll army is a thing now. The tearing down of people seems to be the way that society's going. And is that just an answer to the feelings of insecurity, possibly? If I'm not doing something, and I see this on crypto Twitter a lot. I see guys out there that are busting their butts and really doing stuff, and they get just torn down, guys and girls. I'm going to say their names specifically: Windio, Michael Nye. These guys get so much hate in the community, but they're out there doing stuff. They're at the conferences, they're traveling the world, and I just see the constant barrage of just trying to tear down, and find some funny videos of them in the past or whatever, and just trying, and that seems to be the commonality.
Yeah, that's what's happening to him too.
Yeah, and I guess that's what's going on with you, is what you're saying.
But it bothers me a lot less than it used to. I used to have very thin skin about these things, and that kind of defined me for a long time. But somewhere along the way, I said, I just don't care anymore. And I kind of got to the next level. And now I kind of make a joke out of it. And I do actually enjoy just the sheer insanity of certain things that people say. Like, for example, people say, when I'm traveling somewhere, that I'm spending ADA to do this. It's like this is a provably false statement. You can just go to the IHK ADA address, see we haven't moved any of it. So we haven't made any money off of that. And I've personally lost well over 1.4 or something like that $1 billion of value from the decline of ADA. So there's no one in the world who's lost more money from the collapse of ADA than me.
Right.
But yet you have this perception among certain cliques of the internet that every time I'm in Mongolia or Ethiopia, it's all just a vacation. It's like, yeah, guys, I love getting traveler's diarrhea. I love flying economy on very bad airlines. And, I love staying at hotels where you can't drink the water. And when you shower, you can't get it on your face because you'll get sick. I just love doing that. That's my favorite thing in the whole wide world. Everything's just amazing and awesome. Oh, because I took a picture of me having an eagle on my shoulder, which, by the way, is just adapting to the culture called doing business.
Right.
And a bunch of clueless idiots in their 20s who, because they've lost a little bit of money, think that everything's a scam, everybody's out to get them. And then, you just have to take a step back and reset. And say, guys, at the end of the day, I'm going to tell you what I'm going to do. I said this project's like a DARPA project, Cardano, and so we're going to go out and do a bunch of very difficult research with really smart people. We're going to write a lot of papers, which we did. You can read them, you can see them, they're peer reviewed. And then after we write those papers, we're going to go write a lot of code and we're going to launch a product. And it might take an extra year or two, and there might be some unforeseen delays, but that's called building something. It's called work. Right. These are completely new things. How long has it taken George R.R. Martin to finish his latest novel for Game of Thrones? I mean, it's like these things take time. Right. And sometimes you have setbacks. Do you want a quality product? Do you want something that's going to be here and last and be timeless? Or do you want some junk? The reason why they want it out is not because they care about what it does. They want it out because they want the price to go up. And unfortunately, I think a lot of the key drivers of the crypto Twitter, crypto Reddit, of the interactions we have in this space are strictly about speculation and investment. Right. And I got to be honest with you, there is a whole clique of people who will always win when you're talking about speculation. And the crypto investors, by and large, are not those people. I know the people who win. I mean, I've met Steve Cohen and James Simons and other people. They are not crypto speculators. They're sharks, killers. They're extremely methodical. They're incredibly bright. They're surrounded by super hungry people, and they have unlimited resources to manipulate the news, to manipulate the markets, and to write super sophisticated AI-driven financial models. So if your goal is to go and think you're going to outsmart those guys, you're probably not. And if those guys or their proxies or the next generation of those guys or gals are investing, you're probably going to lose. So, but yet they have this perception in their mind that somehow it's my responsibility to give them a 10x because of a protocol design. It's my responsibility to figure out how do I build the world's next financial operating system so that somebody in their 20s in Ethiopia can get a loan that doesn't cost 35% interest. Right. Or can go ahead and send, or a maid working in Tokyo can send money home to her mom in Manila in the Philippines and not pay 15% on that transaction. Or sending a transfer of funds cross-border doesn't take 5 days to settle. It's my responsibility to do that, to automate compliance, to figure out financial systems that are censorship resistant, and they also protect your personal privacy as a consumer, and that your identity is self-sovereign. These are the things that matter, not whether you can buy a Lamborghini or not. I mean, there's plenty of people in Iran, North Korea, and in China who are in the political party and powerful who have Lamborghinis. Would you like your children to grow up in that culture of fear and paranoia, and at any time the dictator can take these things away from you? Okay, you have the good life now, but what happens tomorrow? Yeah. So it's just crazy that people have this mentality. This is not about making money. This movement has always been about freeing the next generation of society so that they live better and they enjoy more freedoms than we did growing up, even in the Western world.
You said
you're going to have like two camps, I think, the people who believe like you do, and then the people who just want to make money.
Right. You said something that you said you ascended. Now, how did you ascend? What I'm saying is you've experienced the same things I was talking about with the trolling and stuff. How do you not let that affect you? And I know anyone that says it doesn't is lying. I know that it does because I get, I've been attacked on Twitter. I know
he's actually my role model for that. Because he did the funniest thing. Oh no, someone just attacked me on social media, and then did like a little llama gif. And so that's my go-to. So if I ever, that's in my head.
Well, the question is, do you ignore it? Or, okay, when someone's accusing you of using Cardano on a trip, do you ignore that, or do you have to answer to that,
feel that
and defend
to?
yourself? Because you feel the need to defend yourself, because if you ignore it, then it's like almost like you're saying,
well, I mean, there's a notion of proportionality. If it's coming from a person who is a major figure in the cryptocurrency space,
right,
and they're just saying something provably wrong or false, and it's deflammatory, we tend to respond, and in many cases, like for example, when Vitalik started attacking Ouroboros over Reddit, we wrote a formal response to that. And you have to, because these people have hundreds of thousands or millions of followers, and the media will pick up on it, and it becomes the narrative if you choose to bow out of it, and then you have no control over where that ship goes. For the most part, a lot of these trolls, they're not the majority. They're just a small clique, but they're very vocal, so they seem bigger than they actually are.
Right.
Second, they have no influence other than the influence you give them. If I retweet somebody with 12 Twitter followers, what I've done is I've effectively lent them 113,000 Twitter followers when I retweet them. And sometimes you just have some fun with it. Like I most recently in an AMA, I told somebody to fuck off. So sometimes you do things like that, but they become less frequent, and they're certainly fun. But I don't think there's necessarily a magic bullet for it, and it does have a psychological impact on you. Jordan Peterson mentioned that, and he's a clinical psychologist and has dealt with a lot of people who've had issues. And there's a lot of research that shows no matter how stoic you are, persistent criticism does have a negative impact on your mental health. And you can just kind of laugh it off, but it's like being in an abusive relationship. I tend to block a lot of people or mute a lot of people. If certain people say certain things, I just automatically block them, even if it's levity. I just say, I don't really want to see this. And for the most part, I try to disconnect. And I've been tweeting a lot less lately, and a little bit more professionally, or just more about my interests. And I don't even read the comments anymore. I very seldom do that. So that's how I've been dealing with it. But it's still a challenge, and there's still a lot to do. And it really does hurt, though, when there's certain people in the space that you kind of know and you consider to be friends, or you have a relationship with, or you've just simply met, and they know who you are, and they should give you the benefit of the doubt, but they don't for whatever reason. And that I kind of shake up to just an empathy exercise, where I say, well, can I put myself in their shoes and kind of understand their perspective? And then you start realizing that they maybe have a financial incentive or a work incentive to behave or act the way that they do. For example, there were certain people at Consensus who were convinced that Cardano was a Ponzi scheme or an MLM scheme that preyed on the elderly, and physically said this to people, and walked around and told people that. Now, I couldn't imagine a reality where you could just simply actually believe that. Yeah, it's the greatest scam in the world. We're going to go hire a bunch of scientists, build a legitimate project, spend 5 years writing code and papers, and basically beat Ethereum in terms of the quality of our protocols and our languages. But yeah, it's all just a giant scam. And the people who bought during the initial distribution made a 20x or 30x at current market conditions at the all-time high of like 200 or 300x. But yeah, it's a big scam. It's just crazy. It's just crazy to believe that. Yet there were people running around barking this, and there was just not a sliver of evidence that was reasonable. But yet they just said it, they believed it, became a kind of a common notion in certain circles. And that's the reason why Cardano wasn't taken seriously in certain marketplaces, like the New York market, for example, for a while. So when that happens, you just get really frustrated, and you say, damn, this just sucks, because it's a lose-lose for everybody. Consensus does a lot of stuff that overlaps with IOHK, and a lot of the times we're working on open source projects. So at the end of the day, the fruits of the things we do will end up being free and open to everyone. So we both benefit from a cooperative equilibria there. We should work together, especially on the open law and other projects. But when people say these things, they create an environment where people are bitter on both sides. One side thinks we're monsters and defrauding people, and the other side says, you guys are horrible human beings for believing this. Fuck you. We're never going to work with you or have any desire to do anything with you. So when that happens, what you've done is you've created an equilibria where we're now both losing. We both lose each other's contributions, and you just get depressed when these types of things occur. You think to yourself, well, why why would you want to burn the whole world down for no one's benefit? It's not win-lose. You gain nothing by doing this, but somehow you're doing this anyway.
Couldn't it be that one of the benefits of social media, because as you were saying that, I was just thinking, it popped in my head that, wars are started over lack of communication, when two sides aren't communicating. But could it be possible that now with social media, with the ability for all of us to be able to communicate with each other instantly, and the internet in general, not just social media, isn't that possibly better, because then we can possibly get our point across or understand the other side?
Yeah, but communication is scoped to the channels and the environments the communication occurs in. And, these new channels are woefully inadequate to have deep philosophical conversations or engineering or scientific conversations. Like, for example, when Vitalik started criticizing Ouroboros over Reddit, he had every opportunity when he was at Financial Crypto in Malta, or when he was at the Shanghai Winter School and at Bitcoin Winter School, to come up to us, because we were there, my scientists and I, and talk to us about our protocols. And that was an academic environment. It was an academic conference, both cases. And we were well represented. He was well represented. We could have spent hours at a whiteboard having deep scientific conversation, and we would have entertained him because he's a major figure in the space and he's earned that right. Going over Reddit, it's a spectator sport.
Right.
Everybody reading this, the vast majority of them don't understand the science or these protocols. So whatever's said is not about what's being said. It's about rhetoric and style and whose camp are you in. Yeah. And so just by going through that channel alone, it basically said, I don't really want to have a debate. What I want to do is get some red meat for my fanboys, that every time Ouroboros comes up, I can basically have them click this link, and then they can read this thread and then say Vitalik trenches Charles or something like that. So yes, we have more channels, but these channels have certain utility, and unfortunately they're no good for a lot of the things that we tend to do inside the cryptocurrency space. They don't really tell you who people are. You don't have, in many cases, reputation risk or real life identity, especially with the anonymous posting. The statefulness just isn't there, so people aren't held accountable to their overall track record, and people don't see the totality of it. They just see the particulars. They overemphasize virality, so everybody's looking for that one powder keg to cause something to spread and cascade, as opposed to deep arguments. The other thing is, they're shallow communication. So you're not rewarded for having arguments. You're not rewarded for in-depth conversations. You're simply rewarded for getting that great zinger in. In many ways, politics mirrors this. If you watch the recent Democrat national debate, it was like 10 people saying, we're going to go spend $60 trillion and white rich men are going to go pay for it because they're evil and racist. That's basically the summary of that entire debate. And I was just listening to this thing saying, there's no depth behind any of the statements that they're making, and they're just engaging in class warfare. And the sad reality is that the other side is no better. In fact, in many cases, they're worse on a lot of things. So now we have both political parties, and we have 100% certainty that at least one of them will be in charge, that are basically reflecting the communication channels and preferences of people of the day, which is, we want a good soundbite. We don't want an in-depth argument. And where this hurts our industry as a whole is, this industry is really not about money. It's about reimagining society. We're waking up every day and saying, how much privacy should you have and control should you have over your assets, your reputation, your identity, your property? We're waking up every day and say, what is the ideal democracy and voting system? Because look, at the end of the day, these protocols have to be governed and evolve. If we say there's no custodian, a person in charge, well, then how do you change? How do you fork Bitcoin? How do you fork Ethereum? How do you fork Cardano? So the very same governance mechanisms we develop there could be developed for decentralized companies and eventually for decentralized governments. So in a sense, we're reimagining what democracy should look like and consent should look like for the 21st century. Now, this is a super complicated thing, and it's filled with tons of pitfalls. And also, we're not domain experts in any of these particular fields. People study these things for decades. And so we don't want to go and reinvent the wheel where it's unnecessary. We'd like to, as a movement, be able to leverage prior knowledge and mistakes so that we don't repeat the past and descend into chaos. But if we have no good communication channels to have a proper debate, then first everybody's going to ignore each other, and it's all about winning. and there's no cooperation. Second, we will go off and build suboptimal systems. A lot of the, like EOS is the greatest example of this because of the leadership at the top. There are good ideas in EOS. You know, it's probably a good idea to explicitly talk about governance. It's probably a good idea to have heterogeneity in your network. It's probably a good idea to have interoperability. Great. These things make sense on the surface. But each and every one of these topics are super deep, and they are layered with lots of really hard things that require you to be humble and realize that you're not going to totally solve this overnight. It requires years, perhaps decades of focused effort and a cognizance of the past to be able to even make progress on these particular fronts. But they're led by a founder who just seems to believe he invented everything, including my protocols, and I plagiarized them. And so as a consequence, they just adopt crazy ideas, and those ideas end up losing lots of money or harming. And the pattern is that when it gets so bad, those people leave and go start another cryptocurrency.
What?
BitShares, Steam, and now to EOS. And that's a representative sample of a lot of projects in our industry.
What's the solution, though? What are, there may not be just an easy solution for this. If we do have all these communication channels, social media, Reddit, what's the alternative? Is it going to conferences and having live conversations and debates and having it broadcasted somehow? I mean, what's the solution to the problem?
Well, what you do is you do what Elon Musk did. I mean, he's a great entrepreneur, but he's also a great example of how to do really, really hard stuff that people just automatically assume is impossible.
Right.
You start from first principles and you say, look, at the end of the day, we have to separate what is impossible from what's possible. That's the first step. So science, engineering, and cost and economic reality will help you with that sorting effort. And there's all these things that live in the impossible bucket that are actually possible, but they're in the impossible bucket because somebody somewhere along the way had an opinion, and they were powerful enough or respected enough that people just took them for granted. And they say, oh, okay, well, that person probably knows what they're talking about, so we'll just move our way over there and put it in that bucket. Battery-powered cars were a great example of that. He did all the math, he talked to a lot of people, and then he kind of figured out, well, wait a minute, this is possible.
Right.
Then the next layer is this a good idea or not? What's the future like this? So you don't look at today, you look at 30 years, 40 years, 50 years in the future, and you try to build a cognitive model around that thing, whether it be a battery-powered car or this particular type of protocol. And then you have personas, and you go through the different users of that system, and you say, for each of the users of this system, what is their experience going to be like? Is this going to take a lot of time? Is this going to be easy? What type of infrastructure would be required for this model to be successful? So in many ways, actually, hydrogen-powered cars are superior in this respect to battery-powered cars. Because with battery-powered cars, you kind of have to figure out how to rebuild the entire way we think about transportation. People have to now have charging stations at home, and they have to kind of plan their trips out, or we have to kind of figure out how to swap batteries and make them commodities. Whereas hydrogen, it's just like gasoline. You pump it into your car like you would gas. So the user experience doesn't change at all. Your gas station changed to hydrogen station. And now you've reduced this whole problem to how do we efficiently store it and how do we efficiently manufacture it? And there's tons of ideas on how to do that. And the byproduct is water.
Right.
Okay, so this type of an exercise helps you kind of filter out different alternatives, whether it be battery or hydrogen or whatever it happens to be. And then you look at the whole puzzle and then you say, okay, if society could do this, then it's just a question of what is the first mover? What things do I need to do to kind of demonstrate to society that this is not only possible, but desirable? Right. So what Musk did in the case of battery-powered cars is everybody had the perception that battery-powered cars were like Priuses or toys, and they were not sexy, they weren't fast, and they were not desirable. They were just the thing the hippie with the Birkenstock and the beard would wear, but it's not for everyday people or for attractive people, right? So what's the first car that he built? The Roadster, which is like a Lamborghini. It's super fast and it's very fun, and celebrities are driving it like George Clooney, and they say, oh, wow, okay, that's a real thing. So then the perception changed and said, okay, I guess battery-powered cars can be fast and sexy, but they're not for everybody. And he said, hey, no, hang on a second here. And then he releases the Model S. And he said, oh, okay, the lawyers and doctors and accountants can play, and high-priced consultants can play. And these are just up there with S-classes and 7 Series. And then he goes to the next level, which is the Gen 3, and then suddenly that's the price of a Camry. a high-end Camry or a Ford Fusion or something like that. And then they say, oh, okay, I guess everybody can play. And at that point, it changes the perception of all consumers to say this is definitely a reality. And then all the other companies are starting to move that way. Well, none of that was by accident. He started by looking at 30 years into the future and the difference between different paths. And he made a bet that his whole totality of everything, this is the way to do it. And that's why he chose battery over fuel cells. Because he also factored in the solar city and the Tesla power wall and the solar shingles and these things at the same time. He was kind of thinking of all of that at the same time. And he basically worked in a series of iterations to build up that way. And that's exactly how you build a cryptocurrency protocol. You'd say, okay, what's physically possible, what's impossible. And that's what we did with Cardano. Is we did a lot of first principles research and the GKL model, and we kind of did a lot of PL research for programming languages to learn, like, what can you not do with a scripting language? What can a smart contract do? What can't it do? How far can we take the privacy envelope? We're going to do that in a little bit. And that was like layer one. And then in the possible camp, that's where Cardano lives. We then look 30 years in the future and say, what would my experience need to look like with my bank? Or getting a loan, or getting insurance, or spending money, or consenting to something, or voting for somebody. And then you work your way backwards to what series of stages and iterations do I need to get through that I'll get there. And furthermore, if my end goal is that this is totally decentralized and I don't control it, there's no cult of personality, there's all kinds of things you have to do layered into that progression to bring on other parties, to get more adoption, to remove leaders who would, if they stay around too long, become problematic for the system.
Right.
All kinds of things that you have to do to get there. Now, that doesn't necessarily require a communication channel or some debate at a conference or things like that. It just requires a vision, and it requires an effective way to broadcast that vision and get people on board with that vision. And it's like Field of Dreams. If you build it, they do come. For example, the second anniversary of Cardano is coming up. And we're not going to go host a big flashy EOS style event with red carpets and lights and all these things and try to get 5,000 people to show up and pretend like we're huge. What are we doing? We're going to Bulgaria. Now, why Bulgaria of all places? A very small Cardano community there. We're going there for one person, just one person. His name's Vasil. And he's this old dude who used to be a mathematician, and all he does is go around plant trees and take pictures of them. And he's got his Cardano t-shirt on. He plants ginkgo biloba trees. Why? Because they last a really, really long time. They take a long time to grow,
right? But
they'll be around for a long time. And he's trying to make a point about what is Cardano as a movement and a philosophy. It's not for us. It's for our kids. And if this works, it's going to work in 2050 or 2100. And it will be a global system, and it'll be a global system that will transform the financial reality of the entire world and prevent it from descending to a totalitarian hegemony that takes away all your privacy, your financial autonomy. So he's saying by the time these trees get old, the people who live in that world will be the beneficiaries of the things that we do today. So the trees, in a way, mirror the protocol. And he's the only guy I've met, traveling to 52 countries in the last few years, that actually really gets that.
Wow.
So I said, I'm going to just go hang out with this guy and go plant some trees with him for the second anniversary.
I love that.
We'll do a little event. It'll be a lot of fun. And, I'll talk about where we're going all the way to the end of 2020. And we'll talk about the release of Shelley and these types of things. But at the end of the day, that's not what that's about. It's about telling people that this is a day-by-day thing. And every day you do work. You wake up, you study, you think, you write code, you have meetings, and no day is more important than the other day. It's like you can't point to the life of a tree and say, this was the day that the tree really made it. This was the event that made the tree big and sexy. No, every day makes the tree grow a little bit. And over a long arc of investment of sun and water and nutrients, that tree will grow to be something grand.
And wind.
That's what our movement is about.
Don't forget about the wind that makes the tree strong.
Right.
So.
I was going to ask you, and I think you pretty much answered it. What problem are you trying to solve?
I think you just answered.
And you did. You just answered it. And I think people understand that. I wanted to say also that you said the way that Musk got people to accept electric cars is to first make them sexy. How do we make crypto sexy to have it more accepted by the mass? I can't think of the word. God damn it.
A mass market or
Yeah.
consumers.
Yes, consumer.
Yeah,
right,
the
right.
adoption. Sorry, mass
Or mass
adoption
adoption.
is the
Yeah.
key. Is the key? Is the key making crypto sexy? Is that what's going to do it, or have we already done that when it showed up on on TV last couple years ago and everyone bought Bitcoin?
No.
That's a good question. I tend to think of it like almost like music. I'm a huge fan of music. I spend way too much money on audio equipment. For example, these earbuds, these are Master Dynamic earbuds, and I got to these because I bought literally every wireless earbud that was premium quality. I think I bought like 12 different pairs, and I tried all of them until I found the ones that I really like. So yeah, I don't recommend doing that. It's not a financially sound plan, but at least I was able to get good audio. But the lesson you learn from music is that all the great artists, the really great artists, they didn't wake up and say, I'm going to be a rock star and let me go with a committee of people and sit down and figure out how do I make music that's mass market. We do that with a lot of these pop music people, and we don't really remember them. They're fungible.
Right.
You replace one with another, and they have their time and then they go away. But the really great ones, like the Rolling Stones, like recently I saw them here in Colorado. Mick Jagger's still running around at 76 years old with his 8 children. He's crazy. He's so good. He's so good. They're just geniuses. Or David Bowie or any of these other guys. They just said, look, I'm going to go do something, and it's going to be crazy and fun and exciting, and I'm just going to go and play. And I don't care if there's 2 people in the audience or 50,000 people in the stadium. I'm just going to go and do it. If you want to listen, listen. And it was just so great that people said, yeah, I want to be part of that. And, crypto has to have that. We have to go and present a compelling vision of the future. And we can't care if there's 1 million people in that compelling vision or 10 million people in that compelling vision, because we didn't care in the beginning. Guys, when Bitcoin first came out, it was so fragile that the hash rate would double or triple and then collapse all in the same hour because, there's only like 6 or 7 people mining, and somebody decided to change their laptop to something else because they wanted to watch porn or something. Right. It's like this was a very, very small movement, okay?
Right.
But the point was that nobody was in this movement because they wanted to get rich, and nobody was in this movement because they were, how do I get mass adoption? They were there because they believed in the philosophy and the principles, and they thought that this was a compelling vision for the future. So you start with vision, and you broadcast that to as many people as possible, and you tell them what the future is going to be like. And you say, look, at the end of the day, the things in China with social credit, they're going to come home if we do nothing. We're going to live in a world where you're going to have a number stamped on your head at some point, metaphorically.
Right.
And if that number is high, you live a good life. And if that number is low, you live a very bad life. You don't get a job. You're basically a pariah.
Right.
And that number is going to come from these systems, not even necessarily governments. It doesn't even necessarily mean you can vote to get rid of it. It's going to be a global artifact as a consequence of globalism. And so if you want to live in a world where that's not the case, and you have control over your future and you still have freedom, the only alternative is the cryptocurrency world, where we're actually in control of our identity, our money, and these things. And social credit cannot be enforced. Your money can't be taken through civil asset forfeiture. You can't be frozen out of your accounts. You still have financial autonomy and control over your property. Right. And then when people say, yeah, I want to live in that world, that's like step one. And then, like all revolutions, there's a little bit of pain involved to get there. The user experience of the American Revolution was pretty bad for the people fighting it.
Right.
Much better to be a British soldier and on the side of the British than it was to be an American revolutionary. But at the end of the day, people didn't want to live under that system. And they said, I would much rather endure a very poor user experience, very poor lifestyle for a arc of time, because this is worth the fight.
Right.
And that's how you win. Is you make that compelling. It's the same with battery powered cars. As great as Musk is and as brilliant as the people at Tesla are, there's still just a lot about battery powered cars that really are not yet ready for the mainstream. But one day they will be. And the people who buy Tesla stock, they are part of a movement. They're not just buying a product. They're willing to accept that maybe the car quality is not as good as it needs to be, or maybe the range isn't what it needs to be. But they see the vision, they get it, that if we support this, we will wake up in a world where we'll have a battery powered car with a 2,000 mile range that charges in a few hours, that can go just amazingly fast, doesn't need oil changes, and it has a great life cycle on the equipment, so they're ecologically friendly.
Right.
And I want my children to be in this world. So yeah, I'll be willing to go ahead and endure that pain.
Yeah.
This is how I think we need to think as a movement, and that we need to invest heavily in protocols that organically grow to that with participation. And then it's just a game of evangelism, where you tell people what your future can be one way or the other way, and then everything else gets better. The viral apps will come, the latency will come. There's amazing technology in the next 5-10 years, guys, that's being invested in right now, like these recursive snarks that are coming out, like Halo, for example, is the recent paper that came from Zcash, the electric coin company. And basically, if you really understand what these are things you're saying, is saying like, there's going to be a day where you can take enormous amounts of computation, so huge amounts of smart contracts, and you can just turn them into this artifact that's very small, and it lives on the ledger, and you can now verify massive programs with just a little bit of effort. And the same for big clusters of transactions or other things. So these systems will naturally scale to millions to billions of users and economically be viable for that. Furthermore, the latency will get much better. Transactions will get much faster. So, you just push a button and boom, it settles, and you have certainty that it's settled. You don't have to wait an hour like Bitcoin does and so forth. That'll all come.
Right.
And that's organic and natural. And there's hundreds, if not thousands, of scientists who wake up every single day who are chasing that. And they're chasing things like making sure that your cell phone client has the same level of security as a full node. That's where our NEPA-POW's research comes from on our side, and our proof-of-stake sidechains comes from on our side, and the Fly client on the other side, and so forth. But those things are all being developed, and that'll just naturally get there. So I don't worry about the user experience. I don't worry about the UI. What I worry about is the philosophy and the principles. That's why I don't like systems like EOS and to a certain extent Ripple, because they're basically selling a false dream. They're saying we're going to build something with no intention of achieving full decentralization, and then say this is good enough, and you should be controlled by an oligarchy of 21 actors with a currency distribution where like less than 100 people have 90% of supply or something like that. It's like just nuts to say that this is the system that will decentralize the entire earth. You're trading one oligarchy, which is at least bound to democratic mandates and laws and constitutions,
right,
to a plutocracy of unknown people who are bound to nothing, who have consistently proven over the last 10 years as an industry not to be as credible as we'd like them to be. Thus the Mt. Goxes and all of these other things. I don't want that leadership. I want protocols that over time naturally get more decentralized. And I want protocols that are built collaboratively by the scientific community so that the people behind them are interchangeable. There is no one person, including myself, in the Cardano ecosystem who's so essential that if he were to remove us, nothing would work or the whole project would die.
Right.
We have followed processes, and we always say this, our mantra over and over again, process over people.
Right.
And so as a consequence, we now have a map that may take 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, but that philosophy is inevitable. And so it's all just about evangelism. And if we can go out and tell enough people and get it to the minds of enough people, like all great revolutions, we will win in the end. And that we'll live in a reality where we don't have social credit for the masses.
I was going to ask you, one of the things that is, I guess, the sort of the draw and the mystery of no one knows who Satoshi is. Bitcoin and cryptocurrency doesn't have a head. It doesn't have a leader that we can all look at and critique. Or is that a good thing or is that a bad thing? And I know I've read the wiki where that you were on a panel. We have these people like CSW who comes out and says that they're Satoshi and everyone knows he's not. But is that a good thing that we don't know who Satoshi is? Or do we need some sort of a rock star leader or mega nerd that we all can I can't think
rally
of,
behind.
Yeah.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Right. I said two things on the topic of Satoshi, and the first was that he did the original mic drop of open source projects. So
Right.
He set up the philosophy, wrote the white paper, wrote the code, made best effort. There were some things he did really well, like proof of work. There are other things like writing the Bitcoin scripting language, which were done really poorly, and they had to be patched retroactively. But did what he needed to do. So he said he followed the Paul Halmos way of doing stuff. Tell him what you're going to do it, and then tell him what you did.
Right.
So he did all three of those things. And when they were all done, the philosophy was set, and people kind of got it, left. was mic drop. He said,
Right.
see you guys, because he understood you stick around, you become God, and when you're God, then you can do whatever you want. The system will corrupt you. No one's above that.
Right.
So in many ways, by doing that, Bitcoin is equally yours as much as it is mine.
Right.
It's no one is in control, no one's in charge. It's a truly decentralized commons, and no one speaks for it. And that's just a beautiful, beautiful thing. And nothing more needs to be said. It's like a movie that you will never make a sequel to.
Right.
It's a timeless classic. The story is done. That person is gone. The hero has achieved his journey. He slayed the dragon and died nobly. It's like the tale of Beowulf. You can't make a sequel, right?
Well, but then someone comes along and tries to make a sequel of it. And
right.
So.
And we call that Bitcoin SV.
Right.
So then the other thing I've said about Satoshi is anyone who claims to be Satoshi Nakamoto isn't. Even if it was Satoshi, they're not, because the point of Satoshi was to die.
Right.
That's the story. Is that the noble sacrifice to build it, to teach people, and to die on the cross and then disappear and go away, and then leave it to everyone. And if you look at Craig, he's the Satoshi Antichrist in that respect.
Right.
He's like, I created this. I'm in control. I will sue everybody. I'm going to patent. He brags about how N-Chain's in charge of everything. I've only met him once in person. I was in Rwanda, and we were on a panel together, and I didn't even know I was going to be on a panel with him, or else I wouldn't have been. And I remember his speech before the panel, and he opened it up with, "I have more money than all of you, than your country."
Oh, wow.
I mean, it was just like, who thinks this? I literally walked out. There's a video of me walking out the minute that he said it.
Wow. Oh my gosh.
And then when we're on the panel together, I love taking some jabs at him. For example, I said, it was an education question, and I said, I might not have a wheelbarrow full of degrees, but at least I know how to use digital signatures. That was a lot of fun. But anybody who claims to be Satoshi isn't Satoshi.
Right.
He's dead. He's gone. The book was written. It's a beautiful book. I highly recommend everybody read it. But there is no sequel. The author is gone forever. And that's the point. The author has to be gone forever for the system to be the way it is. And the reason why people are so obsessed with Satoshi is the same reason that people are so obsessed with Jesus or any other religious icon, because it's not good enough to dox this person. What you want to do is get some sort of moral authority from the mandate to say that you speak for them,
right?
Either by directly assuming the mantle or saying the person and therefore can relay his messages. There's a reason why the Catholic Church says the Pope is the vicar of Christ, the Bishop of Rome. They're trying to say that somehow this anointed person speaks for God,
right?
Speaks directly for and it thus is infallible. So if you're Satoshi, you're automatically the smartest person. Automatically, all your ideas are perfect. You're the person who's given the world the decentralized future, and therefore we need to listen to everything you say. So it's becoming Satoshi to assume Satoshi's mandate and authority, and to become a deity. And it's just a natural human thing to do. The Jews back in the 16th century had a guy who claimed he was the Messiah. I think his name was Zavi, and he went around for a long time doing that. Every generation has its heir apparent to being the Messiah.
Right.
And our industry, it has its gods, and Satoshi's the king of all of them. So, of course, a lot of people chase that. But the real lesson of Satoshi is tell people what you're going to do it, and then tell them what you did, and then retire, leave.
Right.
And everybody has their time.
You touched on religion a little bit, and I identify with this a lot. I feel like that this movement, this group, this community is almost like a religion in a way. It's like you said, with the Satoshi being dead, there's a lot of parallels, and the mystery of it, no one knows who it is. I wonder, how true that is, because I know that a lot of people are, on crypto Twitter, for example, where I spend a lot of my time, are doing it to try to make money. But I think a lot of people, including myself and my wife, are there for some other reason, and we don't really even know why. Is it because there's something, more to it? And I don't personally subscribe to any sort of religious beliefs, but to me, if I had to, this, I guess, would be it.
Do not say that.
The religion of cryptocurrency.
Really?
But yeah, I I just wonder.
Did you have a question?
No, I don't. I'm just sort of talking a little bit. I wanted to ask you a question. You've done a lot in your life. You've done a lot of traveling. You've made a name for yourself. You're doing, I think, great things. I think your mission is honest, and I think you're trying to solve a problem that needs to be solved. But I wanted to ask you this question: are you happy?
You're the first person ever to ask me that question over a podcast or in an interview. And the answer is no. I'm not happy, and I haven't been happy for a while. The problem when you travel and you take the burdens of a company or you take the burdens of society on your shoulders is you get stuck in a situation where you have to do something and it eats away at you. Mm-hmm. Like a great visual representation of this. Did you ever watch the movie No Country for Old Men?
Yes.
Yeah, remember the scene where Josh Brolin sees the drug shootout and he checks it out and he notices those Mexicans in the car and he realizes that, if he does nothing, they're going to dehydrate to death. Mm-hmm. So he's at home and he says, damn it, I got to do something. So he grabs the water and he comes back and gives them the water, which of course sets up for Javier Bardem to find him and, the rest of the movie to go through.
Right.
But that's like a personification of what happens when you start thinking about more than yourself and thinking about collective problems. Bill Gates has this issue with Africa and global warming and these other collective problems, and they just haunt you because you realize that you have money and capability and power, and you have within you the ability to do something about that. And if you do nothing, either people die or they live in a bad situation. So the balance is, how do you pursue those ends, but still not allow yourself to get lost in it and completely consumed by it and obsessed by it? It does hurt your relationship with friends and family, to say, oh, I'm just going to go travel 200 days a year, or 250 days a year. I'm just going to miss holidays and birthdays and parties and these types of things because I'm somewhere else and I'm speaking at a conference or I'm running a company. Then the other thing is, when you're in a leadership position, it's extremely lonely. Right. Bill Clinton said this during an interview. He was with Larry King, and he said, I'm the loneliest guy in the room. And Larry says, well, you're the president. How are you so lonely? You're always surrounded by people. He said, yeah, but you're a different kind of person. People look at you and they're there because of you. And whether they live a good life or a bad life, they make money, they don't make money, they have power, they don't have power, whether the things they do are meaningful or not meaningful rests solely on your shoulders or on the shoulders of a few people. And at the end of the day, I run a company of 200 people. Right. And every day I wake up, if I make poor decisions, eventually that company will go out of business and those people will lose their jobs and they'll go through hardship. Right. My secretary just recently purchased a home, and whether he can make his mortgage payments or not is in some way indirectly connected to how many bad days I have or how many good days I have. Right. So it's hard to be completely happy when you live in that type of environment and that type of responsibility. On one hand, you don't want to leave. It's very seductive and it gives you the ability to feel a life of meaning. But then on the other hand, the very same things that give you a life of meaning haunt you, and you have a lot of sleepless nights and a lot of stress and so forth. So I try to be, and there's a lot of things you can do, like slow down. That's a lesson I learned from my dad. He's a doctor and done a lot of medical procedures in his life, and he taught at Rocky Vista and CU Boulder, CU School of Medicine as a clinical professor. And he'd have residents come and anyway, the number one lesson he told everybody who did a medical procedure is be comfortable and slow down. Right. Because if you're uncomfortable and you're moving too quickly, you're never going to do it right. And life is exactly the same way. And all the time we feel like we're in a huge rush. We have to answer that email. We have to look at our phone. We have to get there on time. We have to make that flight. There is nothing so serious in life that you can't find a way to do it again, and you can't find a way to recover from perhaps doing it too slowly, unless an asteroid is coming and it's going to crash and kill all of us. The reality is you're going to get a second chance at some point. Like when I got pushed out of Ethereum, it was a very dark time for me. I was tarred and feathered. My reputation was badly damaged. Everybody thought I was down and out. They said, oh, Charles is done. He's toxic waste. Don't talk to him. And now I wake up today in 2019, I'm charged with a 200-person company, right back in the saddle.
Right.
You know, we got a great product that I feel is significantly better than Ethereum. And when it all gets out there, people will know that. So you're never down, you know,
Right.
even when you take a heavy hit. So, you know, your happiness should not be contingent on the moment, and it shouldn't be contingent upon whether you succeed or fail or how much you have. It has to be connected to, you know, something else. And the point of life is finding that for you. And it may take 40 years, it may take 50 years, it may take 60 years. And sometimes people get dealt a really terrible hand. They can have mental problems, physical problems, whatever it might be. And it's tough. And those are some of the bravest, best people in the world. The people who show up despite the fact that they feel horrible. You know, I worked with a guy who was bipolar, and it was so tough for him because sometimes he couldn't sleep because he was in a manic state, and yet he still knew that he had to show up tomorrow, and he knew he was going to be super exhausted. You know, he'd go through relationships, and you know, he loved, wonderful guy, concert pianist, really, really beautiful, person, but you know, he still couldn't get a good relationship. Yet he showed up every day. He tried every day despite those problems, and over time, he eventually got to a point where his life got really good. So you know, happiness is not I'd say, an event, and you say, now I'm happy and life is good. It's more of a spectrum, and it's sometimes it waxes and wanes, and sometimes it's great. But at the end of the day, it's an investment. And every day you do something, and you gradually get to a point where you look back and you realize that you've made a lot of progress. You know, Richard Wilson had a great quote on this. He said, only when you've been in the deepest valley can you ever know how magnificent it is to be on the tallest mountain. And he said that the day he resigned at a press conference. And everybody said, Nixon's done. He's over. You know, he might even go to jail. And then meanwhile, he lived another, 40 years. And throughout that time period, he wrote one of the best presidential memoirs. He regained a lot of respect. He recovered from the financial problems. He came to the White House again. He said, au revoir. We'll see each other again. He came again during the 80s and was an advisor to Reagan. So, you know, he recovered from the shame of the resignation and from people believing he was out forever. And in many ways lived a better life as an ex-president than as a president. So, it's a spectrum.
For sure. I just wrote that down. And I told Yuki that today. Like, when one door closes, another one opens. So,
we just ended.
I also was saying, like, that happiness is, I wrote this down while you were talking beforehand, and then you went right to it. Happiness, I don't think, is a destination. It's a bunch of little moments.
Say that too.
And joy.
Yeah, it's the journey. Life is a journey. You're never going to reach this point of it. It's not a destination, you know, and all these little moments and things that you do and getting up and participating, that's it. That's what we're supposed to do. Otherwise, you know, I think that we just, you roll over and just get, okay, let me bring it back to this. I've just celebrated 2 years and a month sobriety. And one of the things that I reached to the point where I realized I wasn't participating in my family's life. I was trying to kill myself, honestly. And I realized that it's about time. Hell, I'm 40. You know, now I'm 43 years old. It's time to start living. It's either get busy living or get busy dying. And I think what I'm realizing is, and now that I'm sober, I'm not cured. I mean, I have not, now I can realize I have issues. Like, there's shit there that needs to be addressed, and there's stuff that needs to be fixed. But the point of it is you have to just keep going. And like you said, you have so much responsibility, and maybe the happiness that you're searching for is maybe you're feeling like, yeah, you have all these people that are depending on you, but you just know that the fact that you're doing it is already amazing, and that you're out there doing what you're doing, and the people that see that look to that. And you know, there's people out there that, you know, have really bad depression and stuff, I'm included, and you get to that point of hopelessness, but when you see people that are out doing things, it gives you that that knowledge that, you know, it's about trying. And like you said, you're going to fail, and we're never going to grow. We're not ever going to grow and do anything unless we make mistakes. The people I think that aren't possibly succeeding in life are the ones that aren't trying, because if you're not failing, if they're not trying and not making mistakes, because if you're not making mistakes, you're not growing. And it's scary. It's very scary for people to take on responsibility of others. It's scary to put yourself out there. But the point, and what I'm learning is, just like my wife said, one door closes, another one opens. We just stopped a group show that had it wasn't working for us. And what we realized is the point is to do what you need to do to make yourself as happy as possible, but to be able to function and to achieve what you want to achieve in life. Sometimes we don't know what that is. What exactly are our goals?
Right, and you have to have the right motivations. I mean, there are plenty of people who have done things that are world scale,
right,
and tremendously amazing, that just simply will never get the due respect that they deserve. Probably the greatest example would be there's this one person. He saved 1 billion lives by estimates. 1 billion lives. Think about that. 1 billion. Like, do you know who that person is?
No.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. Normally we'd say if 1/7 of the planet is here because of somebody,
then you know who it is.
Should be like God, right? He should have statues. His name is Norman Borlaug. Norman was a botanist who mastered all these techniques of fertilizer and growing things, and he went around and taught a bunch of people. And they estimate over his entire life, he saved about 1 billion people from starvation.
Wow.
So there's 1 billion people alive today because of one person, Norman Borlaug.
Wow.
And they asked him towards the end of his life, because he'd done all these things and nobody knew who the hell he was, doesn't that bother you? And he said, why? The whole reason I did this was because it was the thing that interested me, and it was the right thing to do, and I believed in this.
Right.
And that in itself is good enough.
Right.
The Japanese have this great philosophy. It's called ikigai. And basically, it translates down to just focus in the moment and do that thing and do it as well as you can for that moment. And you can do it over and over and over and over and over again. But that's the point of life, is to be in that moment and just focused on whatever you happen to be doing.
Right.
A great example of a recent personification of that philosophy is the sushi chef named Jiro. I think it's Netflix has a documentary, Jiro Dreams of Sushi. And Jiro Ono is this guy, and lives in Tokyo, and he's been sushi chef for 70 years. And he's considered to be the best sushi chef in the entire world.
Right.
And he basically does the same thing every day. Shows up to work, he prepares the fish the same way, prepares the rice the same way. And he's got basically the same restaurant too. It's in this kind of a divey part of Tokyo in a subway station. And they said, well, isn't it monotonous doing the same thing over and over again? He said, well, what else would I do? This is my life. And when he cuts tuna, it's like the first time he's done it, every time he does it. And it's just the same amount of joy, the same amount of passion. And his goal is to cut it a little bit better than the time that he cut it before. And he wants to somehow find a new way of doing it that's a little bit better. He's still inventing and thriving in that respect. And in many ways, that's the key to life. We can't get caught up in this idea that the things you do today you're only doing them because of some reward that you'll get much later in the future, and a threshold that you'll pass. Like, I'm in medical school because I want to be a great doctor, and when I become a doctor, I'll make all this money and save all these people. You'll burn out.
Right.
Yes.
Because when you get to that stage, what is the motivation to keep performing at that level and having that same level of passion and that same level of persistence? You've gotten to the threshold. What's the next threshold? Like, I'll stay a doctor for 10 years so I can pay off my student loans. I mean, that's not really a motivation.
No.
You have this vision of how your life is going to be and the respect you're going to get and the job you're going to do. But if it's not about the moment, every single moment, and enjoying those moments, you're not going to succeed in life. You have to love what you do. You have to love every single day of it and find insight and passion and beauty in the things that are here today. Another philosopher who wrote about this was Albert Camus. And he said that we all got the story of Sisyphus wrong. Sisyphus was this tragic Greek king who pissed off the gods, and so they sentenced him to push a boulder up a hill ad nauseum. And when he gets to the top of the hill, the boulder rolls down, and he can't get free until he completely gets the boulder over the hill, but he can never achieve it. And we tend to view this as like the definition of hell. You're trapped in an endless cycle doing the same thing over and over again, and you'll never actually achieve it.
Right.
But actually, Bear makes the argument that this is the definition of happiness,
right?
Because it was actually paradise, because you have total clarity of purpose. You know what your life is about, what you're doing. So every single moment is about being the best in that particular moment. Maybe finding a different way up the mountain, or a slightly better gripping on the stone, or a different way of pushing the stone than you've done before.
Right.
And it's just a completely different way of thinking about things. But if you can get your mind in that point, then everything else gets so much easier.
Right.
Because there's no notion of I'm there, of a certain level of happiness, or certain people in your life, or a certain amount of wealth, or a certain amount of prestige, or a certain degree that somehow will set you apart. It's just about saying, I'm here right now, and what's before me, let's do that as best I can. That's what my life is about.
Right.
You get so much more focused. You have much more you have much deeper, more meaningful conversations. You actually listen to people. You're not listening to a person to just look for a keyword and then go into a story at some point and just prove that you're awesome. No, you're actually being there with that person and legitimately entertaining what they have to say and having a real conversation with them, right? And that's I think what people have to do. But it just, for whatever reason, we live in a society where that's not the motivation. And as a consequence, a lot of people get really depressed. As a consequence, a lot of people feel like they're failures, or they didn't live life the way they were supposed to, or that their life was meaningless, or something like that.
Right. It's like the grass is always greener kind of thing.
Right.
So it's like find your purpose and just believe in that, and not keep looking for the newer, better thing.
Also, it is about perspective. Just like you said, the guy pushing the rock up the thing, everyone sees that as hell. Well, in his mind, it's heaven. And sometimes what you think is horrible might actually be great. And a lot of the time, and my wife tells me this all the time, and what I'm learning, by the way, as I get older, is to listen to my wife. Like, she knows what's up, and I don't understand it because she's the same age as me. So how she has all this wisdom, I have no idea. But I think, it's about perspective, and sometimes you don't always know what's good for you. What you think you want or what you think you don't want might not always be, apparent. Wow, we just covered a whole gamut of stuff. I think we could go on for hours and hours and hours.
I know, because that reminds me of like Bruce Lee, just be water. That's when I say just go with it. Just, because you don't always know.
So I want to say to you, I hope you find your happiness. And
well, it's not a destination. I think we already covered that.
I know, but or at least maybe
have those bits. Enjoy those bits.
There's a good closing story then about finding happiness. So there was the Shogun. It's an old Japanese story. There was the Shogun who was a badass, and so he was really good at killing people and conquering things. And so he built a pretty good empire. And at some point, he just woke up and he looked at his sons and said, "I'm going to go find the perfect cherry blossom with my 10 most trusted men. You're in charge now. Bye." And he's like, "Wait, what?" He's like, "No, I'm just going to go do that." And he said, "Okay." So he went on this grand journey throughout all of Japan, one place to the next place, one place to the next place, for years and years and years and years. And every place he'd show up, they're like, he's the ultimate badass, and he's got these super badass samurai with him. And so everybody just kind of leaves him alone. And the other, competing rivals are saying, "Well, I guess we'll let him hang out. He is kind of a big guy, and his son is really powerful. So we'll indulge him in this bizarre fantasy to find the perfect cherry blossom."
Right.
And so eventually he goes and starts talking to this one gal, and she immediately runs off to his 10 men that are with him with tears in her eyes, and they say, "What's wrong?" And she just points to him, and he's kind of hunched over by a tree. So the 10 samurai run over, and they find him, and he's dead, holding a cherry blossom that's wilted.
Oh.
And they asked her, "What did he say? What happened?" And he said, "I found it." And that's all he said.
Right.
So, and in many ways, happiness is like that. It was never the point to actually find the cherry blossom. The point was that the search for it was where the meaning is.
Right.
So you'll never be happy in life. It's just a game of happier, a game of better. It's a game of being in the moment and enjoying all the things. Because you have to imagine, as a shogun, what would he have seen outside of war and responsibility? But while searching for a cherry blossom, he saw all the good stuff of Japan. He was
Right.
politically powerful, so he was untouchable. And as a consequence, nobody was going to bother him, and nobody would be crazy enough to go attack a group of well-trained samurai. So he's not going to get robbed or messed with.
Mm-hmm.
So he got to see all the waterfalls and the snow peak caps of Hokkaido and Fuji. He got to go all the way down to Okinawa. He got to see all these incredibly beautiful sights and meet all kinds of interesting people, go to these different bars, and everybody wants to talk with him because he's kind of a celebrity. So the journey to find that cherry blossom was like the reward of a life well spent. And he reached a point in life where he knew he was going to die. And so he said, this is it. And that one blossom, wilted or not, was the perfect one, because the blossom was the life. It was the travel.
Right.
It was the journey. And I think happiness is much the same way.
I agree.
And that makes me think that also traveling is.
Yeah.
Is
Well, as you're saying
so
that, I'm
important.
realizing that when Tamara and I travel and do the conferences and things, I think that's when we're happiest.
Well, it's making memories instead of collecting things. I always tell people like, and like I've informed my children of this. We're not doing presents this year. We're going to go traveling,
Right?
Because it's making memories
Collecting
instead of
memories instead of collecting
crap.
plastic.
Right.
Charles Hoskinson. I'm kind of speechless because that was my favorite interview I think we've ever done.
Really?
Yeah, that was great. I have so much more to talk to you about. We've got a whole lifetime ahead of us. I'm excited to see what our future brings, what you achieve and accomplish. And I know we're going to see big and great things from you. I want to thank you for coming on the show.
I want to know one thing though.
Okay.
I want to know what he's listening to right now.
What, music?
Music-wise.
Okay, that's a great one.
Actually, I just heard this song from Tame Impala, and it, what was it? Feels like everything's going backward or something like that. And I'd never heard that song before, and I said, "Oh, that's a really cool song, and it's deep, rich, and very interesting." So I tend to get stuck on certain songs, and I dissect them very rigorously, and I try to hear every instrument, and then I think a lot about, well, why did they go in that direction or that direction? And so that's what I'm doing right now. And
Okay.
it'll be the next week we'll have another flavor.
Right.
It'll be a lot of fun. And, David Bowie's Black Star was just a great album as well. And when I first heard it, I said, he's got to be dying.
Right.
And my friend said, "Oh no, he's just in a mood," or "He's David." I said, "No, he's dying."
Right.
And then sure enough, a few months later, I think he died of cancer. And it just made perfect sense. This was him summing up his entire life, start to finish, and basically leaving something for his more astute fans to say, "Don't be sad, I'll be okay, and you'll be okay."
Right.
That was just a great gift to leave everybody, and it was just a great album. So right now it's Tame Impala, and it'll be something else next week.
Very cool.
Thank you for answering.
Well, I want to thank you for coming on the show. Before we close the show, is there anything you'd like to shout out? Any projects we need to be paying attention to? Anything that you've got coming up in the near future you'd like to promote?
Well, I think I finally figured out what to do with Ethereum Classic. So I'm going to the ETC Summit in Vancouver on the 3rd and 4th of October. So I'll probably make some form of announcement there and say, "Okay, here, guys, here's what I'd like to do. And if you're crazy enough to follow me, come with me." So look for that. And then obviously on the 28th, we're going to have the 2-year anniversary of Cardano, and we'll talk about a lot of things there. And that's in Sofia, Bulgaria. So if you happen to be in the area, I'd love to see you. If not, you can see some videos of me with Fossil planting some trees.
Cool.
And those are the 2 announcements I think I'll make that if I didn't, my comms director would hang me.
Right. I love it.
Awesome.
Yeah, I'll check out flights to Bulgaria.
Yeah, we might have to
because
look at flights to Bulgaria.
I love planting trees.
Yes.
If you guys happen to be there, we can do it together. If not, I'll send you some ginkgo biloba seeds. I think Fossil will do that.
Oh, I
Heck
love
yeah,
that.
that would be great.
Amazing.
Well, I'm going to go ahead and close the show. Hang out for just a second after I end the recording. And I think that's it. I think we covered pretty much a large portion of the meaning of life to cryptocurrency to
I think we barely touched on it.
It's all about perspective, and you're right, there's so much more that needs to be talked about. Thanks again for coming on the show. Thanks to all of our listeners. This is our new show. We're real excited about it, and I like this format. I like the podcast. We can just really get in depth and just talk, and we look forward to doing a lot more of these. And thanks again for coming on the show.
Thank you. This was so fun, and I can't wait to come on next year and see how far we've both gone.
Absolutely.
Love that.
All right. Bye
Cheers.
for now. Okay, guys, this was That Bitcoin Show. Thanks for listening. This has been another Euclid and Oaks production. If you like the work we're doing and would like to support us on Patreon or with a Bitcoin donation, please visit our website, euclidandoaks.com.
Hi, Medra.